Welcome to the Essentially You podcast, Dr. Stephanie Libs. How are you doing today, girl?
I'm so good. I'm so excited. Thank you for having me.
Oh my goodness, it is my pleasure. We are going to be talking about something, girl, I just did right before I jumped on this podcast interview because that or my boobs were going to be leaking, which has happened a lot on these podcast interviews over the last several months. We were talking, you are my guru. You have been such a major part in my breastfeeding journey, really helping to support Kingston and I. You are who I tell to go to if women are having struggles. And I'll tell you, one of the things that I was most concerned with, I wasn't even concerned about birthing my child. I was like, one way or the other, most likely I will turn that over in 24 hours or so, give or take. And then I've got a year plus, many years of just tending to my child, breastfeeding my baby, doing all the things. And honestly, the breastfeeding horror stories that I heard, I mean, I honestly, I didn't hear about a single successful breastfeeding story before I had the baby. It was mostly all the scary stuff. And so, what we're talking about today is breastfeeding, the politics around breastfeeding, and the long term health outcomes. Although, I will say, and I know you are as equally a proponent of this, which is I am fed is best. I get it. Like, I know that it doesn't always work out for everybody. I was just in New York and I was meeting with some other best friend mamas that I hadn't had real intimate conversations with for a while. And I was amazed to hear that each and every one of them struggled severely with breastfeeding and ultimately had to either co-formula feed their baby or just eventually just gave up and moved over to formula. And these are amazing health influencers. And it's so funny. I just would have assumed that they had rocked the breastfeeding journey. And so just a lot of ease and grace to all the mamas out there who are trying to make that work.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I think, we've talked before about when it comes to using medication or formula or having a medicated birth, you and I come from such a holistic world. And so for me, the norm is all the natural stuff, but I know that's not the norm for everybody. And it's certainly not like a judgment either way, because of course formula can be life-saving, but very often we're led down these paths by our providers and we're not given full information or full support or informed consent. And very often we're given just straight up bad information that's inaccurate half the time. And so we're kind of led down these paths that we might not have gone down, but the support just isn't there. So I definitely think, like you said, there's a lot of grace to everybody because so often it's not our fault.
Mm-mm.
It's the system.
No, absolutely. I remember, so I was not breastfed. And my mom was really young when she had me. I think she was barely 19. I think she had just turned 19. She was 18 when I was born. She turned 19 the next month.
Wow.
And so she, she wasn't breastfed, and none of her brothers or herself. She grew up at a time where formula was the only thing on the market. It was the highest delivery. And my grandparents basically told my mom, that's what you do. And my mom, just being such a young adult, like a little girl herself, really, honestly, just out of high school, the idea of breastfeeding just, I think, freaked her out, grossed her out. I think all the things. And so they tried to put me on milk. It failed miserably. I was allergic to milk and dairy. I was like, so many babies are. And so this was 1979, girl. There was, the technology was not that great.
Right.
And I was put on soy. And my mom said every time I would be given my soy bottle, I would make the worst little face. And she said it broke her heart every single time she had to feed me because I hated it so much.
Yeah.
And so she ended up breastfeeding my sister. Because she felt so bad. And when she told my mom, my grandmother, her mother, that she was going to do it, my grandmother and my grandfather were like, I can't believe you're going to breastfeed your child. Like, they were so opposed to it. And she was like, yeah, did you see what Mariza went through? Like, did you see how awful that was? And so that my sister got. I feel like all the things that my mom just failed at, or just felt like she failed at, my sister got the compensation.
Right. She got the redo.
She got the major redo
over. Well, I think that's, it's so interesting that you say the family perspective of it, because a mentor of mine, Jeannie Ohm, she's a chiropractor who has since passed. She's amazing. She used to say, we're genetically forgetting how to birth because birth has been so medicalized, especially in our country. And I think the same thing's happening to breastfeeding. We are genetically forgetting how to breastfeed. And we don't see our moms do it, our aunties, our sisters, our, cousins. We don't see other people breastfeed because it's taboo. And, there's a whole industry around like nursing products and like shirts that make sure you're covered when you breastfeed, and breastfeeding covers that you put over yourself like a tent, and it's like you have to keep it so secret and taboo and nobody can see you. And I think that in itself does a huge disservice to us because it's making breastfeeding abnormal, when really it's the biological norm. It's what all of us are meant to do, but we need more support for it.
Can you share a little bit about your breastfeeding journey? Not only not with your two beautiful children, but then also kind of what was the inspiration for you to become an international certified lactation specialist? Like,
Sure.
What was a little bit about that beautiful journey for you? And I know that you have taken care of so many mamas. What are some of the biggest things that come up?
So a little bit about my journey. So I started, my oldest is almost 5. I had planned a home birth with her, and it was, it's going to be a magical, easy home birth.
Always.
It wasn't. It wasn't. We went to the hospital and it was a very long labor, and, we had a medicated birth and it was fine, but breastfeeding was very difficult. And it was really painful for the first couple weeks. And luckily I had midwives who were amazing, and they were at my house every day and they really helped me get through it. And I know without that support, I had mentioned to friends like how difficult it was and painful it was. And people just kind of shout suggestions like, we'll try a nipple shield, we'll pump and give a bottle, do this, do that. And had I listened to those things, it would have led to more struggles. So luckily I had support. I had my midwives there every day helping me get through it and coming up with all these tips. And thank God for that, because that led us down a successful breastfeeding journey. And I breastfed her for 3 years. I also breastfed through a pregnancy, and I tandem nursed for a year. So what that means for those that don't know is that I breastfed through the pregnancy, had my son, and then continued to breastfeed both of them for a year. And now I'm still breastfeeding my son. He'll be 3 in September. So I'll probably wean him then, because it's a long time and I'm ready.
You're like, I'm ready.
I'm ready to be done.
It is 5+ years now. I'm good.
Right. So I have, yes, exactly. I've been
You're going to get your boobs back, girl.
For 5 years. I need them back. So that's really been my experience. My second child was born at home, a much easier labor, and we were in bed breastfeeding within 5 minutes, and it was easy from the start, I think, because I was already breastfeeding and just had more knowledge. So I do know that the birth process itself has a big impact on that first latch, and that first latch really lays the foundation for your breastfeeding journey going forward. And that's a pattern I see so often in my practice. So what really led me down the road, so I've been a pediatric chiropractor my whole career, but I started to see a lot of babies with a lot of breastfeeding issues, and just felt like I'm such a glutton for more education and information. So I was like, I just want to learn more how I can serve these babies better. So I had this one family that came in, and they were like A+ patients. Like, they were my ideal. They came in as a whole family. She was pregnant with her second baby. She came in her whole pregnancy and just came in for prevention and wellness. And there were no issues, but the whole family just wanted to get checked. I was like, great. She had a great birth and was breastfeeding the baby great, and everything was awesome. And they came every week, and they were just, they were just awesome, really aware and conscious and health aware. So they were like perfect patients. She and I had become friends. And so like 5 months down the road, she calls me in tears and she says, I'm in so much pain. My nipples are cracked and bleeding. I want to stop. I cannot have her latch one more time. I'm in so much pain. I want to be done. And I was like, what? Everything was fine. What do you mean? Where did this come from? She's like, I don't know. It just slowly crept up on me. And now I'm cracked and bleeding and it's awful. And so I said, come in right away. Let's check. Maybe there's something we missed. And so she came in and I checked the baby, and the baby had a lip and a tongue tie, which I had missed. All her other providers had missed. I thought everything was fine. And so I stopped checking for it. So that was kind of my big lesson, because it made me realize, like, the breastfeeding journey is so dynamic. Like, it can change from minute to minute. And so that right there made me, just sparked in me, okay, I'm going to check every baby every time. It doesn't matter if they say everything feels fine or it's going well. I'm just checking every baby every time, checking the oral structures, checking their latch, checking their cranial system, and checking their nervous system and their spine. And so that's really what led to better outcomes in my office, and what kind of led me to start teaching some of this stuff. But that is really what encouraged me to become a lactation consultant, so that I could hopefully have more support and more answers for people, because I can't tell you how many families have gone through this same situation, and then they wean earlier than they would like, or they switch to formula or switch to pumping and bottles, which is so much work. So that's really kind of what led me down that road.
I was thinking, what's the average age that most mamas that now, not everyone in your practice is different, I have a feeling, but I would say on average, what is the average age that most mamas stop? What I'm hearing a lot from my friends and my people is 6 months. It's like, if you can make it 6 months, girl, you good. And but I know, and in some other camps, I know like a year, right? And before I even started this journey, like, I thought that the end of my breastfeeding journey was going to be in December, which was going to be a year. I was like, I'm going for a year. And I have best friends who are like trying to plan a big old celebration for me, with a bunch of champagne, all those kind of things, like things you can't have yet for then. But then, as now I just hit the 6 month mark, and absolutely how dynamic it is, in this journey. And I'll be honest with you, girl, I was like, the one constant in my life right now is feeding my child. That is the one. That's everything I do, what I wear, how I wear it, where I go, all the things, what I take with me. All of it revolves around feeding Kingston. That is my whole life. Like, Alex wants us to do something, we gotta feed that baby. So like.
That's so true. That's so true. It's the one constant. I love that you say you have to plan what you wear, because it's so true. I can't tell you how many places I've gone. I'm like, I would really like to wear this dress, but I can't pop a boob out of it.
We were just in New York. I was telling you this, and I wore some pretty sexy dresses. I ain't gonna lie, girl. I was dressed, and I was like, you know what? I was just like, I'm just gonna unzip these. I'm just gonna unzip my dress. Yeah. And so everywhere we went, I had a couple different dresses on that we went, and I was just like, Alex, come here, come unzip my dress.
Get me out of this thing.
Get me out of this thing. So I could pop an arm out. Half my dress is like falling off of me. I'm like, people get to see both boobies, not just one. Like, you're welcome.
You're welcome. It's no different than you were at the beach in a bikini. So
exactly.
No different.
So given all that dynamic adventure, I'm just going to call it the adventure, the grand adventure. What are you normally seeing? Are you seeing 6 months?
Yeah.
Okay.
So it's really varied. Okay. I mean, I have some people who have breastfed up to like 6 years old, and some that only a couple weeks. So I see a very wide range, but I will say, as far as like US standards, about 84% of all infants are initially breastfed. By 3 months, that number goes down to about 54% are breastfed. And then at 6 months, it goes down to about 34%. So there are huge, like, incremental drops at these different points in time. But I think most people probably make it, at least for what I see, most people probably make to 6 months. And then a lot of people like to get to a year. The World Health Organization says we should go at least 2 years,
Mm-hmm.
and that's the minimum. I really think that that is what our digestive system is designed for. Breast milk really should be the primary food for the first year of life. That's really what we're designed for as well. And they say food before one is just for fun. So I
Yeah, and
like to
speak to
not
me about that too in a
yeah.
second.
So I really like to do the baby-led weaning kind of format of introducing foods to babies. And so I like to wait until babies are solidly sitting up on their own unassisted, which usually happens closer to 7 months. 7 months is also the time where we have enough iron stores to kind of keep the baby balanced until then. So we don't want to introduce iron too early because that'll disrupt the gut and the bacteria in the gut. So if we wait till about closer to 7 months, that balance is a little more primed for it. Now, if you have a baby early, then you have to adjust for their gestational age. So like if you had a baby a month early, then at 7 months, they're still kind of a 6-month-old, if that makes sense. So again, I like to wait till about 7 months. Their digestive system, their nervous system, everything seems to be a little more ready by then. And then the way we always did it was we would give one food at a time, and we would give it as its own solid whole form. So we would start with like steamed broccoli. And so we would just have kind of like long, like so that they could hold the stalk of the broccoli and then like chew on the floret. So we would do that kind of thing, lots of steamed veggies, carrots, because that way it's soft enough, but it's firm enough that they can hold it and they can control it as well. We never spoon fed because I like the baby-led weaning format of how it really leaves the baby in control of how much they eat, which is the same with breastfeeding. Like they're really in control of how much they take down. And so I like to continue that going because I don't know about you, but I grew up very like very controlled by food. You know, it was we grew up in a very modest household where you don't waste food and you finish what's on your plate, regardless of how you feel. So I definitely didn't want to instill that for my kiddos. So I definitely try my best to let them lead the way and eat if they're hungry and stop if they're not, and just respect their boundaries on that. And the same with breastfeeding, because I see so many moms with their timer out. They set their timer when they're breastfeeding, and really, like, we don't feed on the clock. It's not like you have 15 minutes to feed and then you're done, whether you're hungry or not. You're going to keep eating if you're hungry. So when it comes to feeding our kids, I really like to let them lead the way. Some babies are super efficient and they'll feed super quick, and some need a much longer sitting. But our bodies are so magical and they're designed so perfectly. Like babies will find their rhythm, they'll take exactly what they need. And our breast milk changes. So our breast milk changes minute to minute. The composition of it is living and dynamic, and it changes based on the baby's saliva. So our nipple is a two-way valve, right? It picks up what's in their saliva and then releases the exact nutrients that they need in that moment, which is so magical. And that's one of those things. Formula can't do that. Formula is a static composition. It doesn't change. So our breast milk changes based on the baby's immune system, what they've been exposed to, stress levels, like everything affects what is in our breast milk. So it's pretty magical.
Oh, I just am so fascinated. I know when I finally had a conversation with my mom's mom, my grandmother, about breastfeeding my baby, I know how she felt about it. I already knew how she felt about all of it because I knew how she felt about it with my mom. And I always loved the opportunity to my grandma to be like, oh, why are you doing that? And then I just lay out I think I spent like 45 minutes on the phone just talking her ear off about the amazing benefits behind breastfeeding and the science behind it. And I'm sure she was just rolling her eyes by the time I was done with my rendition, my little breastfeeding soapbox.
I think that's so important though, because, if anybody maybe didn't get the opportunity to breastfeed, like they might be feeling like they got that same feedback from their family, of like, well, my mom didn't do it and my grandma didn't do it. And nobody did it back then. So now it's kind of our opportunity to educate them, and then, and then educate future generations as well, because they don't really know the benefits of breastfeeding. It wasn't, my mom, I think, breastfed for 3 months and then put us on formula. And that was like a long time back then, and so it's just interesting because it's like, we can't really turn to that generation for support if they didn't have that experience of breastfeeding. So it's almost like our job now to educate them so that we can change the future.
Absolutely. Educating everybody. Honestly, I think there's a lot of misconceptions and a lot of misunderstandings. I'm not going to lie. I've really anchored to you in the steps towards baby-led weaning, because I'm getting so much flack and I'm getting so much pressure to start feeding Kingston solids. He is 6 months old. It is time to feed that baby some solids. And especially family members, especially mamas in my life, they're just like, look at it. He's looking at, I'm like, he looks and grabs at everything. That is what he does. He's a baby.
He's a baby.
He was trying to eat
of course he's looking at it.
He had the remote in his mouth earlier today. I was like, he eats everything.
Yes. Well, I always
put it in his mouth.
Yeah, I always like to joke with people. Like, I mean, if you gave the baby crack, he'd probably like that too.
Yeah.
It's not healthy. Like, you don't give it yet.
Yeah. I am. And I went over, I had your checklist out for all the things. And I was like, until Kingston meets all of these checklist things, Mama, we're not going to move him over to the solids. We're not going to, and then we're going to be doing, and she doesn't even know what baby-led weaning is. She's like, I don't know what you're talking about. I'm just like, don't worry about it.
I don't know what that is.
And, and I was like, and what I'm not giving him is a bunch of rice cereal, let me tell you. And so, but that was the thing. That was the thing to do. That is the thing to do. And, and so, then there's a big myth with, I know that there's a myth that if you fed your baby, rice cereal or solids, that there's a better chance of them sleeping through the night. And, just a lot of things. And so I said, listen, Kingston's going to get breast milk, my commitment is a year, and I know I'm going to go over that. I know that at this point. And I said, and anything else this year is a big bonus. And we're going to start introducing, but I'm in no hurry. He doesn't seem like he's in any hurry, and I'm not in any hurry, and so, but it's been fascinating. I'm having to constantly like talk my family down this whole need to feed this baby solid track.
Yeah. Which is interesting because I feel like they, it's like they want to help, they want to be involved, and they want to help nourish this child, which I think is a beautiful thing. But it needs to come with a little education for them, right? Because, I feel like I'm an anti-feminist feminist because there's actually this book by Kimberly Seals Allers called The Big Letdown. It is such a good book, but she talks all about how feminism has really let us down when it comes to breastfeeding. And I know it sounds very anti-feminist to say, but I feel like instead of supporting, universal childcare or, supporting women going back to work, what if we supported moms and had some sort of paid family leave that was for a year and kept moms home with their babies so that they could breastfeed their babies? Because we know that would lead to long-term healthier outcomes and less chronic diseases as adults, the longer a baby's breastfed. But I'd probably get burned at the stake. If I tried to throw out that.
And I get it. It's such a hard, and being that mama who, went back to, luckily I work out of my house. I'm literally in my bedroom right now. I literally heard Kingston 2 seconds ago, you know what I'm saying? Like, I know he's out there, and I was literally breastfeeding him before I got on this interview, as I mentioned earlier. And so, but there have definitely been blocks of time where I've been stuck. And so I do pump too. I breastfeed as much as possible, but we have pumped milk just cover my booty just in case, because I don't ever want the baby to be starving. I'm also not trying to upset my podcast audio people. Like, I'm trying to keep everything. And so we always have backup just in case he gets, I don't want to prevent him from not being able to eat because mama's not finished up with her meeting for 15 minutes, you know? And so I always want him to do what he wants to do, what he needs to do, you know? And so I know that there's that, it's such a hard balance to be at. So I believe mamas should be able to do anything and everything that they want, but really have that flexibility. And for some, Stephanie, I know I was reading an article and I don't think I realized how much of for some women, how much of a privilege it is to be able to breastfeed, and some women don't get paid to pump, you know.
Totally. Yes. And that's, you know, that, I mean, I came back to work after both my babies at 11 and 12 weeks. And so I had to pump working, but luckily I worked for myself and I was able to build out my schedule in a way that that was conducive to pumping, but not everybody has that ability. I mean, I know some people go back to work, you know, 2-3 weeks after they have their baby because they have no other choice.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's a huge barrier to breastfeeding, because if you have to go back to work so soon, your hormones are still out of whack. They're still trying to balance. And then on top of that, you're not able to pump or express or get enough breaks. And that's the thing, everybody's so different. So we can't always schedule out when we need to pump. I mean, our breasts are going to make milk when they're going to make milk. So, and that's a risky thing too, because if you're back to work and you're super engorged, but you can't take a break for another hour, now you're at risk of mastitis and a major infection and potentially being hospitalized. And for some women, that's really, really dangerous, you know? So there are so many barriers that we face. And so I think the whole system needs a revamp. You know, I think luckily what I am seeing is with COVID and so many people working from home, it's allowing a lot of women to continue to breastfeed longer than they might have otherwise, because they're at home and maybe they have a nanny at home, or maybe they're just working with their baby with them. So they're able to breastfeed on demand. They don't really have to bother with a pump, which I was so ready to throw my pump away. I could not stand pumping. It was like so annoying to me. And so, you know, even just pumping itself is like such a time consuming headache, you know, and any mom is a busy mom. Let's be real.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Like
Any woman,
yeah.
but especially moms. Absolutely.
Yeah.
100%. No, I always feel like, because I pump a couple, sometimes, I mean, when we're on vacation, I don't pump so much, right? Like I'm exclusively with the baby, but when I'm back home, I'm usually pumping a couple times, 2 or 3 times a day. And then trying to get breastfeeding in as much as possible. But sometimes I miss the timing, you know, like it is what it is. And I always just feel like I'm just strapped up to this device. And it's so mind numbing to be. I try to remember to turn on a podcast or something like that. But oh my goodness, all my hours of pumping every week. It is crazy. But I also am so grateful, you know, that I can do it too. So I always got to remind myself that I get to do it, not that I have to do it, you know.
That's true.
It's hard to like reconcile. I know that there are other barriers too. I feel like definitely work is definitely a huge barrier. What we're told, you know, the advice that we're given is a huge barrier. And again, maybe even our babies, their anatomy, like there just needs some adjusting. Like they're not, their latch isn't correct, or they've got a tie, or maybe they're, you know, all the different things that you work on specifically to get babies back on track. And so are there any other barriers that we should just be thinking about, be mindful of? Because I know a lot of mamas, or a lot of potential mamas, listen to this show about to step into this journey.
There are actually, so 2 I want to mention. One you already hit on, which was, you know, if they're having an issue with their latch, which is always great to have a lactation consultant look at your latch. But I also highly recommend a pediatric chiropractor to assess it as well, and make sure that the cranial structures are all functioning like they should, so that there's no interference to the nervous system, because pediatric chiropractors check for the balance in the spine. And the work that I do and have been training other chiropractors to do is to check the palate. So to check inside the mouth for not only ties, but also for the shape of the mouth, because the cranial bones are going to form the shape of the mouth as well. And so if there's any imbalance there, that's going to affect latch. So very often I'll see a baby and they are having latching issues, and it's not a tie, but it's more the the balance and the shape of the palate itself. So we can do a lot of correction there. Okay, the other barrier that is a big one that goes very often unnoticed is something as simple as IV fluids in labor. And I know that seems really benign, like, oh, it's just an IV bag you get in a drip in your arm, and pretty much everybody who gives birth in a hospital has an IV, no big deal. Well, that IV fluid is going to waterlog the baby. So it's going to plump them up while they're in you. And we know the more fluid you get in labor, the more plumped up the baby will be. In addition to that, you yourself as the birthing person are going to be plumped up as well. And it's going to really fill up the breasts with that IV fluid. So now you have a hard, firm breast that's not engorged with milk, but it's pumped up with fluid. So it's harder for the baby to latch onto that because it's tight and taut and not soft and supple for the nipple to get far back into the mouth, which is ideal. So, and then we have a waterlogged baby. So then they take baby's weight at birth. And typically babies will lose a little bit of weight in the first couple days as your milk is coming in, because your milk takes a couple days to come in usually. So they're just getting drops of colostrum at first, which is ideal and helps line the gut and get their immune system going. But what happens so often is babies are born, mom has an IV in labor, they take baby's weight at birth, and then after a day or two, baby loses too much weight. And now the hospital staff is scared and they're telling you now you have to supplement with formula or donor milk if you're lucky. And so now we're interrupting this whole process of having baby latch onto the breast and working at it and practicing it. And they're saying baby's at risk and that you need to supplement and they need to gain weight before you can go home. Now we're introducing formula before your milk is even in, and it's like once the milk comes in, baby would have probably gained plenty of weight, all the weight that they needed. In addition to that first 24 hours, they're peeing out a lot of that IV fluid that they absorbed in labor. So we have a huge misconception of baby's weight and weight loss and, their ability to thrive. So that's something that I see a lot is that baby loses too much weight in that first 24 or 48 hours. Mom's breasts are just harder to latch onto. So now baby's not getting weight. The latch is painful. Mom's struggling. So somebody either comes in and offers a nipple shield half the time with little to no instruction. And then they start giving the baby a bottle, not telling mom she needs to pump in the meantime. So now supply is affected. And so it's this big sort of mess. Yeah, it's a big mess. And then as a mom, coming out of a birth, which half the time, maybe more than half the time, didn't go the way you want, so often we see that too. So now you have this birth, which was hard. And now you have breastfeeding, which we think is just supposed to be easy and magical and the baby just does it. And it's not, it's hard too. So we're kind of set up to fail. And there's just not enough support and there's not enough education for providers as well. So it's just a whole big mess. That's why I really think that if you didn't have the opportunity to breastfeed as you wanted to, or if there was trouble, it probably wasn't your fault.
Oh, it feels so good to hear. I bet so many moms are like, oh, and then Kingston hit my pelvic bone on the way out. So he had a nice little bruise on his head. So he was heading towards getting jaundice. They freaked us out. I went into a triple feeding schedule every 2 hours with Alex, and it was insanity, and it was so crazy. I'll never forget the feeling of feeling like I failed my child. I will never forget. It was so traumatic. I was just crying and crying and I was so afraid he was going to get dehydrated. I was so afraid he was going to have brain damage because there was, and so I was just so freaked out. So yeah, we went on a triple feeding schedule for, I think 48 hours or maybe 72 hours. And by the time I was done with that, I literally thought I had lost my mind. I was so just exhausted. And I know in hindsight, I just didn't know. And they just scared the crap out of me. Now I know so different. And I wish, and clearly he's okay and everything's great and all that. But yeah, it was very, very, I would say this one of the most traumatic 72 hours of my life out of delivery.
Yes.
Mhm.
Oh, that's so hard. It's so hard. And it's just such a common, it's such a common story. You know what I mean? And it's like, it never gets old for me to hear it, because every time I hear, that situation, it breaks my heart, to have these first couple days with your brand new baby to be that hard is just so, so tragic.
Mhm.
It should be like these happiest days when we finally meet our baby, that we've been carrying for so long. And then it just becomes this disaster that you feel like you're never going to succeed, you know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm so glad you've given us, just telling us all it's not our fault. Like this is a
Right.
system that is not necessarily rigged in our favor. And then it tends to be, it gets put all on us to kind of fix it. And talk to me about, I know one of the things I wanted to, we talk specifically, I can't believe girl, I know you got a hard stop. And so really quickly, I think some of us, we just need to hear some of the positive outcomes that happen when we choose to, go as long as we can.
Yeah, for sure. Well, I mean, there are so many health outcomes that we know can be improved with breastfeeding. Well, I should also preface that with, really, there are risks of formula feeding. And I think that it's important for us to know those risks. So things like just brain health and things like ADD, ADHD, even our intestinal health, there's a higher risk of things like necrotizing enterocolitis, formula feeding, which is basically like damage to the intestines. So, and all of these things can affect us later in life. So, my, I guess, kind of takeaway is that if you were formula fed or you have a child that was formula fed, it's certainly not too late. There's just, so much that you can do to sort of turn that around later. And I think that's where so much of your stuff comes in, Mariza, because there's so much that diet and lifestyle can, turn those things around later. But I think, I can't tell you how many babies that we see that, like, most of the time their breastfeeding issue is just from a bad latch, and just helping to fix the latch can make things go so much smoother and lead to a successful breastfeeding journey that lasts as long as you want to, rather than when you're forced to.
I love that. And I do know, I think I read something on your Instagram, which we'll talk about in a second, like just going to your Instagram. I just love it. Is that babies who breastfeed, I don't know for how long, have higher IQs.
Yeah. So as far as I know with that stat, the longer the baby is breastfed, the more accurate that statement is. So yeah, it's just determined by, the length of breastfeeding and kind of not formula feeding. So we know that, like, a formula fed baby might have a lower IQ. It doesn't, of course, mean that they will have a lower IQ. That's different for everybody, but it just is more of a benefit to
Yeah.
breastfeed.
I was going to say it just speaks to the benefits of breastfeeding, that if we can do it, if our circumstances allow us, do everything we can to make it happen. And
Yeah.
that has definitely been my commitment, that no matter what, hands down, I will do whatever it takes to continue this journey for Kingston, because I know that, and I think that tied to how we eat. How I eat, everything I do revolves around feeding that baby. And it's what I even put into my body, and all my supplementation and everything that we
Yeah.
do to love up on the baby. But I'm really excited that we're having this conversation, because I just feel like I have more ammunition to take to my family more. I
Yeah.
mean, I have my own, but I just was like, I just interviewed one of the best breastfeeding experts out there, and she's like, listen, you know food
Here's the
before
deal.
that year is just a good old time. It's
Right.
not necessity.
So true. So true.
And then, okay, so I want people to come find you. So I know that you've got a course, but that is for practitioners already. And I know that you're going to be creating a breastfeeding course, but in the meantime, so we can know where to go, when that information's out there and available, where do we go?
The best place would be my Instagram, Dr. Steph Libs. So DrStephlibs. That's me on Instagram. And so I pretty much post everything there, any new courses that are coming out. I do have a free download on my office website, which is cafeoflifesandiego.com. And there's a free download on there on storage guidelines. So how to store your milk. So if you are a pumping mom, like I was, it'll tell you, how long milk stays good out in the open, in the fridge and freezer. So that's kind of a nice handy little thing to pop on your fridge. And then I do have a course out for really for chiropractors so that they can learn more of this work. I have had over 100 chiropractors take the course already. And so I'll be creating a directory soon so that if you are a mom searching, you can find one of these chiropractors who's had this training. And then for moms who are breastfeeding or preparing to breastfeed, I will have a course coming out probably later this summer, all about breastfeeding, and hopefully it'll be like having your own lactation consultant on your phone.
Yes. And if you are in the Southern California area, especially in the San Diego area, I promise anyone in the California area, it's worth driving. It's even worth flying down to Stephanie's office. Her office is a dream. Babies galore, everyone being taken care of. There's so much amazing energy. Like, it's one of my favorite places to be every single week. Kingston's been getting adjusted, and we had some latch issues out, in a couple months in. We had latch issues way from the get-go, but it was a couple months in that it really noticed it. And he was definitely his soft palate and his cranial. So we got everything locked and loaded because we were noticing he just had a little bit of colicky. He was gassy, lots of burping, and he was just sucking in air. And so Stephanie got him just taken care of. And so, I can't imagine not having Kingston there every single week just to get checked, because he's using his head as a ramming rod these days. And I'm like, is your atlas out? Is your upper cervical complex out? And so I just love it. I really want to emphasize, if you can get your babies into pediatric chiropractic care, yes. But if you're in the San Diego, Southern California, even California area, or wherever it's drivable to San Diego, Cafe of Life is the office, and it is just absolutely incredible. So I just wanted to do a shout out for that as well, Steph.
Thank you so much. I just love you and your family. You're just gorgeous.
Oh, thanks, Penny. And thank you so much for coming on today. I loved our conversation, and I really just hope so many of us as mamas and aunties and best friends and sisters, all of that, as we have these conversations, I hope you can take what Stephanie said today and just share it, just shed light, on what this journey could look like, and the benefits, and just getting real in the barriers and things that happen to us as mamas, trying to navigate this beautiful world with our children. And so thank you, Steph, for helping us out here.
Thank you so much.
All right, honey, see you soon.
Okay.
Bye.